Bo Jong De De Te Shen She Bo Zhuo Jiong Bo Yang Dong Bo Zu Pi Sang Zhi Bo Dong Xiao Su Den Bo De Wang Xie Bo Ji Den Jin Bo Ju Bo De Ka Lu Jia Wa Lang Na Men Bo La Dong Men Nang Jie Den Bo Song Jie Jiang Den Bei Jia Wan Jia Jiang Du Bo La Jiang Zi Ju Du Jiao Su Jie Wu Gang Zi Gang Ni Zu Wu Ju Dong Zi Sa Jian De Na Gong Ba Den Bo Nga Nian Ji Den De Na Jiu Jie Song De Zhe Ge Ba Jiu La Jiang Zi 安那达刚求多罗藏王，一切将作世间人波，超过极点所那能给我，公布求你求那将真，千秋颠簸之面道月久，仙多照我求那将真。六指见照随波送光劫，鸟面清见求那将真。广播突厥切电波，当切真别电波，色那一电叫做界，地见邪恶相争，道边的长者我就给愿个送人主，觉多等当求救波，先就求了相争，这年这月那样的老棒到了手头。先给当报应点点，给对那样相思。对我这样么小心，给我别送错吧。让给三年用说的，天天上街谈吧。干嘛着这么面动，就嘛喜欢去吧。没了落到真当不，都是就能得到。是能的月堂姐在包夜，高朋到年全去朝天。高当那当前边老主，随便做人找我找我用。
Thus I have heard. At one time, the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of Vulture Peak Mountain, with a great gathering of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the samadhi of the many aspects of phenomena called profound appearance. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, saw the five skandhas in their natural emptiness. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said to the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son of a lineage train who wishes to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom? Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva answered the Venerable Sharadvatiputra with these words. Shariputra, those men and women of the lineage who wish to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should look at it like this. The five skandhas should be seen purely in their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form also is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness, and having no characteristics, they are unborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure, they neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, and no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no phenomena. There is no quality of sight and so on until no quality of mind and no quality of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance, and so on up to no old age and death and no exhaustion of old age and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no ending, and no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide by means of the profound perfection of wisdom. And since their minds have no obscurations, they have no fear. Transcending falsity, they attain nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times have relied upon the perfection of wisdom, and have become true and complete Buddhas of unsurpassable, perfect, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the profound perfection of wisdom, the mantra of insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering should be known as truth, for it is not deceptive. the mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Soha. Shariputra, this is how a Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and said to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, noble Avalokiteshvara, that he had spoken well. Well done, O son of the lineage, it is so. O son of the lineage, since it is just so, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Sharadvatiputra and noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and the entire gathering, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One.
多觉见波的心，多觉成，求在德罗巴当那罗巴，边觉中边巴当阿底下，娘来心老觉老所望的，上报同灭一念能着的，确定的愿的当照边边。现在各三六年四年吧。家家这边就拉萨瓦的，家家有面兄弟乐着呢，大瓦这把这边可就见，三界公众爸爸要三所，大摩大愿就拉萨瓦的，协助当边就俺阿的想，嘎当天边面包中的见。念就能就过去son la so，嘎当拉玛那拉娑瓦的，康杰心的自己总阿玛，我到这边我说节奏的，当我这边到不给着的，要是就把这拉娑瓦的，叫做跟的拉玛都结账。康乐高的些年之中年，就当天幕公主存在面，只见那么那拉所望的，让家所若跟那大爷面。街上他帮这边就我就，在院这边他看这把眼，生在些年那拉所望的，叫我更多样当那么当，这边就这边那弄这间，啥当弄这年的少做呢，多久讲给个。我念叨也就三界就当作界就能了，想求不多大念就做见，大概去切界别错难见，说了平些三界诸般修三界就作界就能了，想求不多大念就做见。大觉切切切别所当见，罗罗偏切三界诸般修三界，觉当所见觉当拉，想求不度当年就尊。大觉切切切别所当见，罗罗偏切三界诸般修。哎呀，嗯。哎呀，他个这通他你了，小娃你，恁通嘛跟拢去吧是，你跟拢去吧是，那家里几个月呗是，给吃主意呢，那眼吃啥些呢？你老年都俺讲了，等不图片我不拍呢，你他也比申请堂姐，你带着掉头一些，你堂姐送下来的是，你俺带了着头一的，我讲呢，你俺带的，你得去这点了来，你去今年叫啥来来，颜色着去。
As usual, there are two things that is important for the practitioners or receiving the teachings or when one is practicing. The one thing is in the beginning, cultivation of appropriate motivations, and the second is to dedication at the end of one's practice or receiving the teachings. So when it comes to the cultivation of motivations, one should ask what kind of motivation it is needed for us to be able to engage in that appropriate practice, the proper practice in areas. Is so think about, Buddha Shakyamuni, who came to this world more than 2,500 years ago, who was given the teachings on the teachings how to gain enlightenment and shown us the path upon which one, take a journey for the benefit of other sentient beings. So one's answer to such question is to follow the path that has been shown by the great teacher Buddha Shakyamuni for the benefit of sentient beings.
가서 미바체 메땡이 때 미세 제가 스케마도 아니 되게 나가 되니라 템바 투비 한볼라 아니 다른 것은 어디 집에 남아나지 내가네 나리 집에 남아나래 다 간지 자치 쉬지 사마다지 남아요서 줘봐대 네 골란데 강되니라 쉬도 여 상인데 지잖아 미바체 되고도
So once motivation of benefiting other sentient beings is needed. It is inevitable motivation that is needed as the followers of Maya and the teachings. So for that, now one can think about one's very purpose is to benefit all of the sentient beings. So when speaking about all sentient beings, one can think about entire sentient beings, including insects and so forth, not only just the human beings. So one can visualize all sentient beings on this planet Earth who wish to achieve happiness and overcome sufferings.
네, 다들이 이제 세유비 거라야 뭐 선제 뭐 뭐지 하러. 다나 뭐 수진이 소차기 레스다버데 아니 고란들이 질 되제 되제 전내고 제거로. 마도 주메기 선제기다. 뭐지 나시 찍고 이 창등이 선제 뭐 대래 평가 뭐지 다 나가기 니세기 디나기냐 되려로.
So then when speaking about all sentient beings, if we only think about the sentient beings in this form realms, or the sentient being who has this physical form, then it's not that is not adequate to think about all sentient beings. There are many formless sentient beings who are as equal as the atoms of this universe. So one should think about not only the sentient being with the physical form, but also, formless beings need to be included as well.
아이. 다 된저지 이미바 지체연비 거라 아니 타예비 선제셀러디 바다다리 되기도. 제가 저기 콜라 찍고 보는 선제제로디 아니 나게 타다냐비 선제지 가래 연구를 상에 되지. 야 뒤서 콜라디 춘주로 이제 통연비 거라 아니 야 미바디 춘대니 가도. 샤추 선바생에 때 senji donghen seta ji beba jiramato luji dewa donghen seta ji sonne shanchu senbi ye shanchu samba senare nambi jongna de tangji tawsi ke yo marwa yo de nyanga chesho de rangi senne dene sanje temba yin sebe kola senji deji rota keche sebe kola socham da kanje nanki tada nyambi senji kangala ni senbi cho dengi jina ni senji donghen seta songsha yungdi 마 소바데 처제데 주어지래다 솜비게 라네도디 다 간사 소소게 님이 바데 총도에 내가 첨보로
Otherwise, when we talk about sentient beings who are equal to space, as vast as space, right? Then one might think, well, there are not many sentient beings who can be equal to whose number can be equal to this, to the space. So we may have this kind of idea. Otherwise, if one is unable to think about the formless sentient beings. So when you have an idea of having all those formless sentient beings, then that really makes sense when we talk about the sentient beings who are as equal as vast as, or space and so forth. So, so therefore, wherever the beings, whether they have a physical form or not, so long as they have this mental consciousness, they are all sentient beings. It is for this Buddha has stated that we need, overcoming of suffering. We're not talking. Buddha is not emphasizing merely on overcoming this suffering or the physical level of suffering, but it is more emphasis on the mental level of sufferings. So it is for this we find it at the end of the Buddha's praise to Buddha Shakyamuni, it says, subdue one's mind. That is, which is the teachings of the Buddha.
Ngay, tele pe kodewa jishe, sanje senere kanje tu sewa chimbo dan, chinzi ki chawa de nime yueze ti jibara. Chinzi ki chawche de nime yueze ti jibara. Nime yueze manche sa peche shira nyunyu ro. Shira nyunyu sena ta kujo tenne la siri ma do. Kanje chimba dan sewa sengi de sanje kanya rwa chigi chena ma jawa ina, chimba dan sewa sengi de ngwa ki ma toki saba da jache che tse de ti ru chi jangen ina, nimi ki yueze ti jibara.
Therefore, the Buddha's wisdom and compassion is all pervasive. There is no such, avenue, or there's no such places where the Buddha's wisdom and compassion is not pervaded. So it is so pervasive as the light, as the sunlight.
달루도 토메네 랑기 전체자 이남 바데 라마 용서 저버데 투저와 쳔베게 지 니마샤와 나게게 랑기 되냐 나가테니라 예치 근데 랑 단다 대사 당가 소소 디징엘로도 소소 치고서를 지기 천하면 저와제 아니 대화되지 동해면데 바냐와 인자네 용서 저버데 라다 따주냐바세나 디그를 라다 대화되바 동해면데 바냐바기 아니 용서 저버데 네 데리마서 네 친해 제사게 네 처전되는 여상이지 라 tenjochi ne sanjana me be nje ne jawal me be deba tenjochi ma no tsogi ne chose chi shege tse chose ni ma de se de chi che to wa na mane yu ta mane ma tsogi chi jacha ina che me to ngi chi mane kyasun chi so de so no ma so tenjochi me ba chi sen le chi de chang chang de ga na ro ji ro pu su to ba ko ka ri che go ta de so no long long so ji me je wa che samba le po de da.
So then one here, with this in mind, one then visualize Buddha Shakyamuni, who is surrounded by all the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, such as Arjuna, Asanga, and so forth. And then imagining yourself in their presence, surrounded by all sentient beings that we talked about earlier, not just only sentient beings with the physical form, but also then who, formless beings are also in the presence, imagining that being along with yourself and having a genuine desire to receive the teachings for the benefit of all other sentient beings. And thinking about that, just as I myself have a desire to achieve happiness and overcome sufferings, so too all those sentient beings and high sentient beings have a similar wish to achieve happiness and overcome sufferings. It is therefore may myself and all other sentient beings to receive these sublime teachings to overcome sufferings and achieve happiness. So try to cultivate compassion towards all other sentient beings and have a fervent faith towards the object of refuge, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And one should receive these teachings with very delightful manner, not just being a somber demeanor, but rather have this delightful, physically and mentally have this delightful attitude to receive the teachings. This, let's focus on this for a couple of minutes, meditate in other words.
다 들리게 결혼 쳐봐 지는 거네. 강선 봐서 이주. 네 상주 Lam Rim Chenmo 다. 뭔가 좀 데려와. 생디 터서 되면 라들랑 되와. 니 동안 용수 조백이 제자네들 제자 용수 조바. 아니 그네 지 사보다 자체 세나리 네 루루 신다 첨번이 이제 로라게. 라마니 이제 명하다 준비해서 등지 행문에 손을 짜지 뭐지. 내가 전에 얘기 교화선 뭐 정상에 등지에 손을 지라는 가서 데리 거서 봐 지내 제제.
So with these motivations, we're receiving the teachings, great deities on the stages of the path enlightenment, which is a very, a wonderful method for achieving happiness and overcome sufferings, and which encapsulates the entire teachings of the great beings, such as Nagarajanas, Asanga, and so forth. And it is such a wonderful for us, all of us, to be able to take our time and engaging in the discussions of this discourse.
나야 담은이 제법은 좋죠. 아니 등지에 네 상처는 봐. 될 자이 사지 제제. 아니라 동보 추군 좀 때문에 제법에 저와 당말 교바집에서 취지 저와 저원이다 되게 줄은 예시자다 저와 동방은 저 너무 제때 저기 봐서네. 용 첨모의 동이 사지 되는 자와 실이 세네. 근데 배제 다쳐서 배제 먼저로 되지.
So let's begin by reading the four major outlines here. The first outline is the greatness of the authors given in order to exhibit the teachings as a noble source, and showing the greatness of the teachings in order to engender respect for the teachings. And the third outline is how to listen to the teachings in which both teachings and its author are great. And the fourth, the sequence in which the disciples are to be taught the actual instruction.
지다 아주 용전다기 송제도 만들어라. 이쯤 친히 집에 가라. 아주 되제시도 아주 니마이나 주유추도 디디 동으로 다 겨워서 비거이나. 아니 최근 요소 줘봐라. 아니 주유추도 전에 아니 뭐네 남아 송진라. 추제 코로나로 또 뭐도 제가 좀 남아들 송진도 인자네 코 소사 제장던제 아니 생지진데 아니 남아 자전뭐 송신라 전부데 맞지 송연 비거라 추제 코로나로 또 많이 배되는 로지트는 배우까지 저는 뭐 소야도 근데 인제로.
So traditionally, this teachings of the Lam Rim is given on the basis of, actual teachings on the six preparatory rites are recited. If possible, most of the time in the actual tradition, the long version of the 6 preparations, which includes the long version of the supplication verses of the lineage gurus of the Lam Rim Chenmo, but very leisurely, will take time and leisurely recite all that with those visualizations and so forth, and with the good motivations. It is to say that at many occasions, there are a number of disciples who are among the audience just by during the recitation of the supplication verses to the lineage gurus, the verses to the lineage gurus. It is to say that they have gained such a high levels of realizations with regard to Lam Rim.
아니 대중에 저도 배제 하고 당에 그뒤 사치데 리고야 아니 나를 전부 연락만 주비게 단 샤게선에 소소 최희에서 천선받아 이런 거네 사제대요 맞추바지니마 다 주디 차선을 지대 로고에 대한 나를 전부 취인도 단치래도.
This is also a tradition when teachings of the Lam Rim Chenmo or the great teachers stages to the path to enlightenment is given, and the teacher who is giving the teaching must be recited all the outlines of the Lam Rim Chenmo. So that's what I'm doing.
당연히 사제들 주셔요. 아니 사제 좀写나로.在사제写把的用我就的经验的，让就找现在的比参当电的逻辑大像有人把年色的，基本我做的，让就找现在的电的还得着中文的，说的就恰些的点比说的起，是吧？사제可能也。
So then this will be then followed by the 2 subdivisions of how to rely on the teacher, which is the root of one's spiritual path. And once one has relied upon the teacher as a root of one's spiritual path, then it says how the students train their mind after having relied upon the teacher.
다 되는 로 제다 자기 발라니 되는 니체 어디 되는 니보는 비슈 그거다 니보 제다는 비슈 니체 도무지 다 니보 제다는 비슈니 나치 나치 나자는 니바치스다 니보는 뭐지 도무지 다 니보는 정말 송 주거 중요다 통모야 나제를 뭐 냐서는 주거 제다 주거 침변 나제를 뭐 냐서는 제제 도무니지 동보 수니 숨발라 제인사 대전은 주고 생제 관한된 바 생제 제다 집에 생제는 셔발로지 동문지다 생제는 셔발로지라 송 생제는 로발로그 비전세 타시레로로 상제문 주가 로발로베를 많이 셔바 아치 동문인지 달로발로베 remba ni sheba ni sheba chila teba chimbo chila la de dan cheba do doje teba la zi dombo la song shangsan la ba la de jang jang ne je se damba song zo ne je da len bi su ye ji da dombo ni ji zo ne je da len bi su ni kan la lo bi je song kan la lo bi je de la ba ne de la je da la bi remba ji dombo ni ji de la je da la bi remba ni sheba chila la de dan cheba de pa se ta ma ni la la zi dombo ji pa se ta ma ni la zi la ni 파제 타마니 하질라 주 신의 나라도 평야 셰바 데니 땡겐지 근지 디제 때바 신의 나라도 뭐 데니가 강급이 전세 고랭에 버 소셜 하지지 다 동봉가 되지 소셜 하질라니 신의 나라도 나라도 동봉지 다 나라도 나라도 시 나라도 저 때마 나라도 로도요 나라도 강비지 강비 나라도 좀 제지 다 동봉라서 당대的年代就说了我说泸州就公办这边自己大中啊多么年就到电脑配吧啊多么年这多么年到电脑配吧了送那么你在看那年人就别人把的在看那年电脑配吧我去多么这在看那电脑吧你那送各项我说啊在他让个东西写把电脑电呢到我进来这边人吧去多么了送这边各项我就我马这边我마지 베진로 가버랑로 잡아지 당한서 돈이 또베 실라 손대제네 따와랑지를 잡아라 동보 간속에 돈이 또 그래 돈이 또 봐라 가르쳐 버려 가샤 까버려 가샤세데 소리에서나 이게 나한테 가자들 리뷰 가지 니에레스 ane lanchi gaja te shidri tang nyudri segre, ripi gaja te ane jipa te yongi lopan zembi, dadu chuban zemba, ane denba zemba, ane tende chila segre seye, ane nga su kosu baba tende chila ledo.
Now we're on the chapter of teachings on emptiness. So here the teachings on emptiness, having discussing on this teachings on emptiness, what will happen to us is our main aim is towards not only just understanding of emptiness, but to gain a genuine realization of emptiness. For that, what is needed for us to be able to have this realization of emptiness is to, first of all, to identify and recognize the object of negations. So when it comes to the object of negation, there are primarily of two kinds of object of negations: object of negation on the path, object of negation of the path, and object of negation of the reasonings. So,
되지. 나 가서 이 배는 파 시주지 정해나 되느라 먼저 뭐지 산재 랑체스 열세도. 생긴 거 중에나 저 용체문에 시에대 랑신지 열세가 생 랑신지 열세가. 다 랑신지 열세가 생긴데 아니 강라야 마대 봐 코로 랑신지 열세가지 용메도에 가래 지들에서나 아니 뉴디단 시리기 지들에 세디 고대본데지도.
so now here, in all those sutras and teachings of the both sutras and tantras, that we find as same statement of that actual the mind is what we call the subtlemost mind is mere luminosity. And if there is a luminous, if our mind has a luminous nature, and why the luminosity is not actually shining forth, what is preventing it? What prevents one's luminous mind radiates? It is because the two obscurations, particularly obscuration to liberation and obscuration to omniscience, are the two main obstacles which prevents our nature of our mind, radiate.
Then 제가 무슨 제 차부 쉬우지. 배나 대로 상지 추 동보 나서면서 등간에 거에 지 계시 시와이나 센라지 줘서요. 센 덴바 마주 센라지 좀 마주 바래. 얘나 카투 센라지 좀 마주 바래서네. 마지 마 초반에 지나마 송비거라. 아니 초바들 베데 초바데 노로라 되게 가서 시디 크통이 매매세 거라. 여 말이 양사 너 잡아지네. 지 야마르세도 양사 쉬우지래 대비 천하제네. 아니 텐데 차라기 돈에 손에 아니 타마 아니 같은 전에 마서는 저래 집하기 타마야 엄마 탄지 걸래 해비 걸래 신이 내 상시지 마도 바래 손샤를 마도 텐데 차라고는 손에 마도 유무비 내지게 상시 여세와 되나요? 카투 상시지 마도 바대 때문에 가르쳐래잖아. 아니 상제 털을 켜봐잖아. 아니 뒤지 매바다 때문에 되네. 텐데 차라기 돈에 아니 손조래 예세네. 나 뒤기 차라했던 손이 뭐지 차 맞아 뒤 고다 제고.
So it is by understanding of emptiness, by means of through understanding emptiness, one will be able to dispel those obscurations, so that our nature of our mind can shine and radiate. So it is for this Buddha has taught, although the Buddha gained a realization of emptiness, and he has gained the not only that emptiness of external phenomena, but gain the realization of internal phenomena such as the mind and so forth. Yet at the same time, Buddha has not given this direct teaching, the non-inherent existence of this of the phenomena and external and internal phenomena, but rather he has given in such a gradual manner, without expressing that non-inherent existence of all phenomena. Rather, he has given in a gradual manner, based on the teachings of this, based on giving the teachings of subtlety of dependent originations. It is by very skillful means Buddha presented these teachings to the different philosophical philosophical who hold different philosophical standpoints, views, in other words.
야, 그때 당연히 가슬려서 페이지에 양대니 레시데레.
Ahora 이름 첼로.
네. 당연히 이게 튀죠 되는데 변나 엄마랑 집어서 이네 장시지 맞고 캔내가 말 장시 주고 캔내 그래서. 아니 뭐니 매바다 장시 맞고 손도 와서 러비가라. 근데 장시 맞어서 대한당 장시 맞고 버서 그래 맞도 장시 맞고 버서 러그 말해서 엄마랑 집어 된게 자로.
So now when it comes to the Madhyamaka Svatantrika, so they do not accept non-inherent existence of all phenomena. Although they accept the all phenomena do not exist truly, their lack of true existence. Yet it is, however, they do not accept the non-inherent existence.
야. 맞죠? 다리 메이 패친지 줬어. 얘도 몽조. 야, 야 데니레 말로시다. 데니레 제 담바나 경험보나 뭐니 메바 니 대시비 셔당 줘바 쳐바진 젠 템바니라 떼바당 집이 셔를 변나 지마킨지 주비 말라소바 제노 셰 랑진 고발라 담비 쳐방에 받아 자유 셔로 대나 대라 당바 매집이 되네 인수를 제다 인수진의 시비 리베 넘버 셰네 대여바 마주발라 셰바네 로벤데 안치 팀바 예노 예노아치 대나 로벤데 용나서 대카나 통하다 지스 팀비 셰바 마주바 셰바 근조바나 대다 손라 아치 랑신고비체 리베 넘버 셰바나 매시에 손바 마에 대다당 하마나 라오 예장 랑게 무 주발라 인치셰비 리베 셰저도 켈레 고무고 메테데 로벤데니지 랑게 무 니지 주발라 코데 코나 니라 셰비 리베 셰저지 쳐바나 대당도 주베장 쳐바 셰바 망도 셰바 따로 어서도
So we're on the page 222. And then if you look at the second last paragraph, it says ultimately internal things lack essence because they are produced, and also because this distinctive statement of this they are being produced indicates that they are contingent upon the dependent. For example, they are like the human beings, etc. That a conjurer has emanated. Thus, he definitely adds a qualification ultimately in the refutation of intrinsic existence. Ultimately in the refutation of intrinsic existence. With regard to this, all of this masters agree that some things not existing ultimately means that when a reasoning or the reasoning consciousness is properly analyzing its ontological status, places it under scrutiny, that consciousness does not establish its existence. Therefore, even the text of Baba Viveka, in positing conventionally, says such things as without engaging in analysis that accord with the perception of reality. When refuting intrinsic existence, they often say does not exist under rational analysis. Thus, this statements and those of the former statements are similar.
야, 다 가족이 내 거스 봐 가서 가서 대시해 봐. 근데 가셔 가യും 비거라. 근데 ranshi 마주 버선다 러브 집어 지거 엄마 탄지요라. ranshi 마주 벌어. 대한당 ranshi 주 마주기. 집어 자여를 여 말해서 계속 되려. 근데 더 패치 가서 더 고카고 제래. 엄마 ranshi 버선에 대해 아니 ranshi 대한당 ranshi 주고 말해서 ranshi 주고 그래서 엄마 ranshi 버선에 대. 델레 체 통보기 단단 의미 내지기 유네는 벌써 엄마 탄지요래. 아니 ranshi chuba singde zai zemo zajiya mare ranshi chuba zai zemo zajiya na ani sanje singde nyangin len deba singde da tu senjue sewa singde teg mare esger.
So in other words, Madhyamaka Svatantrika, the way they reject non-inherent existence is ultimately lack of ultimately intrinsic existence. That is how they, how the Madhyamaka Svatantrikas way of saying that lack of inherent existence. They wouldn't say that directly lack of inherent existence. They would add ultimately, always. Whereas Madhyamaka Prasangika, the ultimate is not added at all, but rather directly saying non-inherent existence, all things that are non-inherent existence. It is through understanding of this standpoint of non-inherent, standpoint of Madhyamaka Prasangika's standpoint of non-inherent existence will enable us to understand how our nature of mind is, how our nature of mind is lack of inherent existence, without adding ultimately lack of ultimately inherent existence.
야. 다 가족이 단다 저저 컨신 데네세데 용수 조바데 아니 마타 마시 비체나 아니 교조선은 조바레 마도 이 코노기 무비 넬루드 제스와이나 아니 저이 점어서 지샤 투고 말에 예세듯이 로아 자신이 맞으세 단다 가르러서나 단다 가족이 로바 데어사 통조 용수 조바 계시시엔데 아니 마타 마시 비체나 교조기 나자데 테도레 데어 세면내버요 말에.
So now, when it comes to Madhyamaka Prasangika standpoint, when they reject all phenomena are non-inherent existence, they reject inherent existence, in other words, across the board. Although there are many things that appears to us, such as environments, beings within the environments, house, and so on and so forth. Everything that appears to us, when we do not undergo critical analysis or scrutiny, they are all findable. There's something that can be found, something that is said to be existed, and that is existence. And those level of phenomena is what we call the conventional phenomena or the nominal phenomena, which is also not contradictory to the reasoning as well. So when it comes to the ultimate, when it comes to ultimate existence, then all of those things that appears to us do not have inherent existence. They are all lack of intrinsic existence, intrinsic character.
어느 예전에 주가 트라이 점원사지면아 된적이 사실은 나자 터버들 세면 가르치는 내용 말이라서나 아니 그 된대잖아 땡내 레카체도래 슬라이드
So all things do not exist inherently across the board. And if this is the case, then how can we, establish environments and beings within the environments and so forth? It's because they can be established by dependent originations. It is because of the dependent originations all things can be established as a nominal existence, and it is because of dependent originations all things can be, established as an ultimate existence.
ngö tru na te tru ba jitan chen la te bang ge se de ta ran ngö ni ji tru so na ko ran shi tru de ran shi tru ne chen la te ba ge jin de ma res chen la te sa ti ko ro ngo ne ran su me te ta ro wa se de.
So if something that exists by its own side, something that exists intrinsically or inherently, then why such things need to rely upon other conditions, causes and conditions, if they have an intrinsically existence by its own side? The very dependent actually suggests that everything that exists are lack of intrinsic existence.
Yeah. De no la ripe she de ma tu ba de tin ba de se chi xie do be na da ji ga zo ye ma ta ma xie be na kyun zo ge na jia den jo ba ji ta ta xi ji be ne ni me ba se de ni be na zu so ju chen na ni je da chen la de ba da ma de ba ko no yi ne du de mi du se de ngu bi ne lu ran la zhe sa do de ni den ji xi ro de ge zhe yong be ga la ni ran xi ji ma tu ba ko no da yi de mi de xi ro ko bi ge je ba che sa yi de ni yi de na ko no ran xi ji be na ngōye nēchī ngōye nēsā rōng, jī ngōsō mātōng pē nē kōsā rā, zōnyē nā yin, jāngsā nā yin, tēnzhē jī kī tsua nā yī lē yu dē, mē tī nē kāng yu dē kā rā, mē tē tāng jē shē nē, yī tī nā nē jī yā mē kī nāmbā chā yā jī rā, kō tsē nē mā nye pā tē, shē zē tē mā chū bā sēng tē, tēnzhē jī rō kō wā jī lē tū rē.
That's right. So when we are not undergoing critical scrutiny, and everything that appears to us is something that is what we call as a nominal existence or the conventional existence and conventionality. And their conventional existence, accepting the conventional existence of things that appears to us are not contradictory to the reasonings or not contradictory to the rationale. But when we go through critical analysis of the things that appears to us, and all this seems to have its own character, or it exists its own characteristic, will be diminished. When we go through a critical analysis of each and every phenomena, there's no such things, even such things down to the atoms. If one go through a critical analysis of all this, at the final analysis, everything that appears to us will become unfindable. This is how we should analyze within one locus, within one object, in other words. Analyze what part of what level of this, to understand the two dimensions, the dimension of conventionality and dimension of ultimate within one locus. When we think about the ultimate and conventional phenomena, we should not think of two separate entities, but rather within one entity. One's analysis of conventionality and ultimate must be completed.
취지도 배나 간사기 단세세는 게 간지 제고야나. 아니 나랑 간지 지 좋아진데 땅에 맹해지기 생기지기 시불라 봐 라자와지 랭해와지 여바지 같이 유다래다 같이 유네 멜란지 절레래.
So this grasping at self or person, particularly grasping at self or person, is always exists within us. This grasping is something that is, always present in our mind from the beginningless time up until now. They're always within us. Even in our dream, when we think about I, we think of I as something that exists intrinsically, that had inherent existence.
다 딘트리 인간지 슈첨부 예병원데 걸라 아니 시기 조조지 근데지 타나야 코로지지 지 그게 잡대세나리 코로지 지 나올세나 캔서 된데 따다리 지레다 바진에 링에와지 여바 시샤체는 마도 코지가 좀 잘라르마서는 코 점바진비 손나데 가서 디나요고 말이.
So for us, whenever we think about self, or whenever the self or I that is appears to us, we have not even thought, we did not even have a, slightest thought of the self or I that appears to me or that I think of is something that is non-existence. It is something, that is mistaken. Where the self or I that appears to us is we never had even a fraction of thought that self that is appears to us is something that doesn't exist. We do not have that because we have such a strong grasping at self from the beginningless time.
야. 다든지 단지 로나 이게 마타 마시비체나 나스든 짐비컬라 마타 마시비컬라 주보 코노리지 하나 임비소리 지어다 소소기 파 신주지 제나 파 절로 파 제대지 제나 송다 소소기 따당데 그동 계시시던 변 나이니 나이라파 나이 지지 세미컬라 강가코이 차시지는 건지 제나마도 차진데 간지질이 임바된 가서 전에 손나 제고야 말이.
So when without undergoing critical analysis, when we think about self or I, we are imputing self or I based on our physical body. But if we undergo critical analysis within the body, we will not be able to find that self. We cannot find the self that is apart from body that is apart from self. We cannot find at all. There's no such a whole, parts and whole, in other words. There's no such a whole that can be pinpointed as the self or I.
야. 된대지긴 거는 건지 가서제 아니 된대기 다시 템포지게 그거 시불에 옆에 계속 시에 몇가라 아니 소소 뱉대 그 저러나기 템포지 선한 동안 몇가라 아니 나다 나요와서 요와제 요와데 셰병원이 아니 차단된 데는 뱉으면 마초상 차네 되더리.
So it is because
because
of this grasping at self and looking at this self as something that is so stable as mountain. And our view of self is something self that really exists intrinsically without undergoing any change or any transformations. And it is based on such grasping as self. And we have this sense of I, which actually derived from our attachment. And then we have mind again, which is given rise by our attachment and so forth.
된대기 요와시 베콜라 맨날 나세티 싸워니는지 타니비 나면 두세테 된대기 참아로와 변에 때부 투병 뭐 토마 세제되는 투지비에 토마에 나자데 네 단다 네 천사 페이지 뉴스 잼베에 네 나자데 라자 다란데도 타니비가 된대기 타니비가 토마는 내바들 해야 되거나 그거지 된대서 손에 캐면은 와데 토마는 미니면 제 산지 라신 요새가 산나를 지면 동안제 ko tempa tuba de chi yang ko jin ro chi mo shi ro ji le sa de re sa na ko ji mo do nga so ga sha ka nga ro ji chona ka ka shu de cha gi do pena nga pena ta na ngi phumbo de pena ngi che de phama ni ge de la nya cha ya ni ta ngi de ngi cha jang ngi phumbo che ne wa re da ta ngi thoma me ba de ngi ji che wa nga de ane len de ten de chi be da de thoma me ba ta da pa de le ba re se de den de ge nga de chi ten de ka de chi le ten le wa re ane pa me ne ran shi ji chu ni jo wa me ngi ye chi ta pa so de ji ren ten ten de yo re do ya me de de shin ji che ge re do.
So then here, when we speak about the non-inherent existence of the self, and then we are not actually rejecting the existence of the self. The mere existence of the self is not, we are not rejecting over here. What we are rejecting is the self that our understanding of self that needs to be rejected. That is what we are rejecting. Our understanding of the self is something that is unchanging, intrinsic self that has intrinsic character. And this is that we are rejecting. We're not rejecting the mere self or mere I. There is a conventional I, that is actual existence. It is because of based on the conventional I, we engage in the practice to gain state of enlightenment. That is what all the Buddhas of the past has done, such as Buddha Shakyamuni. Buddhas, the mere existence of the Buddha, in the conventional existence of the Buddha is still there. It actually, come all the way from beginningless time, and at the same time, it is not that the very conventional I or the conventional Buddha or such are not something that is coming from the beginningless up until now without changing. There has gone a lot of transformation, a lot of changes have taken place, but the continuity of that lingers up until now, from the beginningless up until now. And similarly, by myself, as I myself, as a who first entered into my mother's womb and given birth by my mother, and then now I am in a form of bhikshu at this time, and the mere me, conventional me, the nominal me, is always there. That doesn't mean, again, it is there without undergoing any change. It's not so.
야, 된저기 진주면은 저 하시 태그 말에 진주면은 저 하시 태그 말에 다 랑시지 주마를 된데 태그 말아. 저 하시 마데네 된데 태그 말에 레전드 주든 제비 태그 말에 주든 제붓 마테와네 된데 태그 말에.
So this continuity of me is still there.
그 진주면으로와.
Continuity, the continual of the me, without going through the transition from momentary transition and up until now, the continuity of me is there. If one lacks the understanding of this continuity, then again one will not be able to establish cause and effect. One will not be able to establish dependent originations.
예, 제den생이 남주 영역이 더 신주 제거다.
So this is what we need to analyze, think and contemplate or reflect one's mind on this.
방송.
So it's a 10 minutes break.
야, 당아저 대고바데 타랑 관계 로시 봐 생기야. 대강을 가지 다녀가 대강을 가서 가자 뭐시에 되네. 가자 까바데 오마라지 별로 가자 까위에레베. 안 탄지로 가자 까위에레베. 괜찮네 지래도.
이제 테스트와 내년에 되게 너의 테스트 하셔야 돼.
어.
니시냐고.
안타죠.
Sorry that I haven't read completely the paragraphs. That's the last paragraph. So Rinpoche has already finished reading this. So, however, this master do not agree as to whether something that exists essentially must be held capable of withstanding scrutiny by rational analysis of its ontological status, as I have explained at length above. The two masters, Buddhapalita and Chandrakirti, hold that something that exists essentially must be able to withstand scrutiny by rational analysis of reality, and hence must also be established ultimately. Okay. So the now next chapter, this chapter 18, is a misinterpretation of the Svatantrika and the Prasangika, so distinction.
야, 저도 되면 배 타고도 망에 말로신로 기가 바테데 저기잖아. 실라 거거서 말. 저나 편도 다 오미종 첨부도 너무 편하면서라 소진을 지로. 야. 가자 된거 바테 타랑 강에 루시에 발라니 해서 타랑게 된 거서 대니 수지 선장네 따와지를 제바고 동번에 로베 사제 잠지 제바 탄저와다라지 니스 셰네 탄전제비 세카네 메라지 장 달레마이 제네메니라메 제메명고 강당 강나야 지와나야마이 시빈 제번 제바나 젠루라 네지 제비 고네 제와 제 가반제도스 텔로 로벨레덴지지 제제 장쇼 주바다 젠쇼 신진바 강게장 니바메비 쩨거네 스숑모 대답이 쩨데 상제장제 룰 민주비 젠센제 젠센 제반 제반나 로벤다와 잡에 바르브 오마베 오메타와지라 제베 터서 탄지 샤거지 라지 메테도 시에 가반제네 탄지지 쇼 세원제도 어서
So whether to carry out the refutation with the Svatantrika's procedure or with Prasangika's procedure should be refute the object of negation with Svatantrika's procedure or with the Prasangika's procedure. This has two parts. So the first, the meaning of Svatantrika and Prasangika, which tells in chapter 18 and 21, and which system of all to follow so as to develop the right philosophical view in your stem, chapter 21. The meaning of Svatantrika and Prasangika, it's not clear that commentary of the Master Buddhapalita set up a Prasangika system, distinguish Prasangikas from Svatantrika. Nonetheless, considering his commentary on the opening lines of the fundamental treatise, there is no essence in which anything has ever been produced, either from itself, from something else, from both, or the without cause. Here, he negates the four types of protection by pointing out the faults of other system. The Master Bhava Viveka refutes his claim. Refutes him, claiming that the Buddhapalita's argument have no power to establish his own position or to repudiate the position of others. Now the Master Chandrakirti extensively comments on why Buddhapalita's own system do not suffer from such faults, and in so doing, he stated that Madhyamaka should employ reductio ab absurdum, in a Prasangika, or arguments not autonomous or Svatantrika's argument as their method of instilling the Madhyamaka's view in others. In this way, Chandrakirti elucidates the Prasangika's position through refutation of autonomous arguments. This section on how to possess such Svatantrika and Prasangika's distinctions has two parts.
야. 되게 제당가 저 라지바다 탄지와서나 변한 들시버려. 到上去了边呢，我就电视上呢，我们探究上呢，当然你多几些的，变成都是而且的，探究是说呢，就当电视的探究你给起来，探究是说呢，你知道吧？嗯变成西起来讲呢，澎湃性呢，澎湃呢，电这马的话，电把住个热了，探究是澎湃期间呢，电这马引把它电把住别些了，啊那。这期间，这马些把人把它大把人别些，这期间马些把它大别些了。等着去了呢，他就是能等着去了高的，他多数这些的，他就生一点。
Thank you. Thank you, Zamne. Ani ko dubje tu.
他就也没多多介绍，我们他就话是呢，主下的多别高了，我们他就上了点呢，你主下的多图个的，让其决定是个嘛的意思，我们他就话是，我们让其把电子写的电早间这个嘛的，你碰把起电把面的电这一边写的是呢，大嘛个把了，你用个嘛的意思呢，我们让其把，没拖动的介绍。
The reason why this two has those two Madhyamakas have a name, that two different name. One is Madhyamaka Prasangika, one is Svatantrika, was a Uma Telgua in Tibetan and Rangyuba in Tibetan. So the Taigua, which is the Prasangika, why it is called Prasangika is because for the Prasangikas, it doesn't really need to, you don't need to, you know, you don't need to establish or to convey, correct reasonings just by stating the proof statement. The proof statement alone is enough for them to understand the subject matter. Whereas the Madhyamaka Svatantrika, the proof statement alone is not sufficient for the Svatantrika to understand the subject matter, but rather it requires a perfect reasonings to be able to establish, to be able to understand the subject matter.
哎呀，他谈的的，接下来些话是呢，我觉得我们谈就要等我说别个了，诺贝尔上去讲英雄的，我说我们谈就的是谈就是那三个字嘛的是，因为到了嘛，现在面试的个了，你大家的现在的我别个了，他谈就我们谈就也到外定了排吧的是，你对了诺贝尔来的这个他苏珊是呢，等着集中的是，因为要把点到这吧也。你我们探究脏了的呢，我们别到上去了，结果都7万字也是，他那个就给起来的。
So we have read earlier very clearly the meaning of Svatantrika and Prasangika. It's not clear that the commentary on the Master Buddha Pali that set up Prasangika system and distinguish Prasangika system from Svatantrika. And nonetheless, consider his commentary on the opening lines of the fundamental treatise, where it says, "There's no sense in which anything he has ever been produced, either from itself, from something else, or from both, or without a cause." But when it comes to the Madhyamaka Chantakriti has distinguished precisely based on what we have talked about earlier. The Prasangikas, why they are called Prasangika, is just mere proof statement will enable the Prasangika to understand the subject matter, whereas the Svatantrika proof statement alone is not sufficient, but it requires perfect reasonings.
哎呀，就那个你过就听到多多就开始写起呢，别那个这个点点的这边就不点点写个了。我们上去把人呢，别那bomba起些两把面的点点人别写的时候呢，上去就点是眼巴的高个，点是就眼巴的高个，点是的那个这个上去就点是写的，他写不了上去主把要把写下去别多呢，点是起了上去就点是老多等等，但是就当然呢，我说的了，去听到我声音当。天道生的用在可能说的强处点个了，但是结果没有结，那个做上批个学生呢，别那让信息主办一下点呢，其中参与电视机来点呢，你到进来结个的也是那让举办给解释。我们他就得个嘛的，不把期间点不把你点把点着嘛的话，点把出个日子，不把期间点着嘛一把的点把周边写的噻呢，他就上了点呢，我们到让进来结个了嘛都，你上去就点是个嘛的也是呢。 된다 거는 따와라지래 집에 땡치다 탄지니 때문에 개체들이 되면 주말에는 ring에다는 사지마도 다시인가 레시마제 데사시
Let's get 가난한 나를 중에 계세요.
야 근데 디디치 저기 펜치 되는 펜시
So it is for the Prasangika, they will be able to get the subject matter that is to be known, that is to be understood. In other words, non-inherent existence of the vase, for example. For them, it doesn't require a correct reasoning for them to understand. For the Prasangika, it doesn't require any correct reasoning, but just proof statement. If you give a one statement to prove, just to prove that is the vase is non in an existence, mere stating, giving the statement of proof itself will Prasangika will be able to Prasangika will able to understand the things doesn't exist inherently. Whereas Madhyamaka Svatantrika, for them, this kind of proof statement alone is not enough at all. It is not adequate for them to understand how things doesn't exist. There are no true existence. Because in order for them to understand things lack true existence or ultimate existence, in other words, ultimate existence, things do not exist ultimately. To gain such realizations, for them, it requires a correct reasonings. Without stating the correct reasonings, the Prasangika Svatantrika will not be able to understand or not be able to ascertain the lack of ultimate existence of things in event.
아야 되게 가서 내가 가르친 거에서는 오미 따와랑질을 제발라 제빠진의 랑질을 제거가 된 거래 변에 신내서는 시와 대반이 거로라 사통스 등 통수세를 근데 이 세리바도 저기 신주제네 제 간제 제대로 지라 신주제거라 오미 따와를 다가나리 인세 산나도네 아니 신주 제급이 제세기 엄마 탄저와서는 진세 탄저 진세리 아니 랑지비서는 랑지디 진세리 진세를 되는 메다샤죠 엄마 따와니에 발 신주 제비 마도 지 강제는 미송되는 또번에 시기 말해 토마
So what we are actually trying to discuss here is now when we speak about the view of Madhyamaka, the view of Madhyamaka cannot be ascertained just mere single pointed concentration alone. It requires a vigorous analysis. In fact, it says one need to go through a critical analysis of how things really are. Have a clear understanding of how things really are must be derived from analytical meditations. So therefore, for the Prasangika, it requires analysis, their analysis on subject matter is based on proof statement, whereas Madhyamaka Svatantrika, their analysis is based on the perfect reasonings.
아야 메우토도 그래 신주쟁이 초바 메다샤서 지르와
So this is how they got the name of Prasangika and Svatantrika. One will be able to grasp on this ultimate reality. One will be able to ascertain ultimate reality, mere proof statement. Other requires a correct reasonings.
아야 딘디기 토는 야지 맞아 남비숑 세나레 오미숑 세나레 되게 메시기 추추시거에 뺏게 쳐보라
So therefore, we must understand, what distinguishes Madhyamaka Prasangika from Madhyamaka Svatantrikas.
아야 좋다 뭐만 제가디 제반 거는 좋아래 따이 거는 좋으세 되래 간제 제바전에 그런 민 그런 제바 그런 전에 림바 전에야 엄마 타지에 봐도 해고로 도마미 이제 지라 뭐네 세그너리 용수 줘봐게 아니 땡제 차라 이거는 타마 아니 또베 따선제 땡제기 때문에 아니 장랑대선 이제 나이제 교통이 뭐지 지 차비 님번에 엄마 타지와 세대 차로로
So this is how all those philosophical tenets, advances themselves from Vaivashika to Svatantrika, Svatantrika to mind only to Madhyamaka Svatantrika, and Madhyamaka Prasangikas. It is through critical analysis of how things really are. And then finally they reach to the final, standpoint of the Madhyamaka Prasangika, and they come to, then that individual will come to understand things does not exist intrinsically across the board. Their existence is mere imputed by conceptions and term.
야, 링에도 막 카실로데 시에도 손에 최소의 카실로제는 년도 손에 좀 잡아지. 네, 자자는 근데 진용 토 주고야나. 근데 요 시기야나 때 컨텐츠나서는 이지 되는 마신 주를 지제네. 소소서 카나로 상나리지 동야 고구면나 야 되는지 네 tem반에 손에 지진 잡배양라 소버 대달라는 소아데 지다 알아봐자는데 근데 소소서 마치 가서고 소소 셈바데 소소 다보리지 저 미바데 지잖아. 근데 변도 용으로
So now, we are discussing on such a profound subject here. Now, I, as a speaker who just keeps speaking, and you as a listener just listening, and we should not live on that level. We should go deeper. What we have discussed, we need to do our homework. Just contemplate and think about it, analyze it. If you have, if there are statements that are something that is enigmatic or something that is convoluted, so then one should then try to recite the Manjushri's mantra, supplications, such as reciting Arapaza and so forth. It is all, when it comes to this, all these conditions coming into together of this, conditions of accumulation of mirrors, will then be able to, able to generate accumulation, or one able to attain accumulation of wisdom. With just mere listening, and I'm saying what I'm saying and just listening, and then when the teaching is done, but just keeping our text aside and so on and so forth, will not let us understand how things really are, or will not let us understand the lack of inherent existence of things in event.
야, 다 된다이 탄지 말아 된다이 테라니 진조치니 니치 진로 가바당 장로 잡고 동보라니 데바 잡아당 대가보 동보네 탄지와당 라지반 조수도 말은 조수 도마시 다음에 왜장 되다 탄지 당시 스시게 시에 내송도 아니 대시에 대달래 가시 줘봐 샤워 내가 자야 안에다네 데이터마데스 주빈 제시레 대랑 가시 나래 게데 탄지 땡시스 되나 데레 세메주바이나 왜데 마주바이 데라 게데 쇼 담보타나 디세 니가랑 주바이베 현재 캐랑바 시지다주 쇼 니바타나 현재 캐랑바 메메베 메여바니 임베 현재 캐랑바 시 지다주 제나 데라 레네 세메 세메 주바 강인바 데니가라 주바 예노 셰바 데니 코 미셰데 데타 고에 주시 거비 되나 강 땡시 거바 데라 세메 주바 예장 예라 세메 주바 데 제다 셰데 현재 생지 체바 소다 제서바비 유마인비 셔로 데 라니 라온 세메 주바 제다 셰데 추비 진세지 레 듀르본네 종이 셔르 로시비소 데이셔로 고아탄 슈거타게 세마니 말에 세마니 데 켈럼바 답지 오보 난지 장신 켈렘바 이노 데나 장신제 켈럼비 고네 젠지 슈 신진바 이노 시세데 슈거라 다 세메 True Maju, Hagoji Mishete, De Sambane, Hagoji Tsemani Mijuba, Mijuso, Rangi Tajam, Seme Juba Mishete, Rangi, Seme Juba, Ta Jejang, Lo Sipe, So, Di Shere Nigala Seme Jubi, Ta Mebe, Semake, Lambala, Tupe Na, Seme Majujang, Kelambi Gone, Sinjin Teba, Yino Sheche, Do Yang Deni Le Song, Kachi Liberation, Lo Shachi.
So, let's read through the text again here. The refutation of others' position in chapter 18 and 19, and the second is setting forth our own positions, chapter 20 and 21. The refutation of others' position, this section has two parts, stating what is others believe and refuting those positions. What others believe is here. There have been many ways of defining reductio argument and autonomous arguments. Who could explain all of them? That is why I focus on only a few of them. The first misinterpretations. Jayananda advocates the following position. In this explanation of Chandrakirti's commentary on the middle way, or the Madhyamaka Avatara Tika, he says, question, if you consider reductio ad absurdum, an ad absurdum argument to a syllogistic reasoning, then does valid cognition establish it? If so, then it would be established for both parties. So how can you say that it is what the other parties assert? If not, then since it would be inappropriate for the other party to assert what is not established, how can you say that it is? How can you say it is what the other parties asserts? Reply. Some might answer, whatever valid cognition establishes is established for the both sides. But this is precisely what we do not know. When one party posits something as a probative reason, even though valid cognition may establish it for the one who posits the syllogism, how can that person be certain that the valid cognition establish it for the other party? After all, the particulars of other person's mind are object of neither perception nor inference. And how can you be certain that the valid cognition establish it's even for yourself? For it is possible that you could be deceived. In as much as you have been under the influence of error for any exceedingly long time, therefore I accept the nature of things on the strength of both proponent and opponent, accepting such as valid. Hence, I refute the position of others' term of their own assertions. The proponent of any syllogism does not know whether the opponent have established the reason for themselves by means of the valid cognition. This is because neither of these two have a valid cognition, or the valid sense type cognition, or valid cognition based on reasonings. Given the proponent's access to the proponent thinking you cannot be the certain that valid cognition established the reason even for yourself. For even when you determine that you have established it by valid cognition, it is possible that you have been deceived. Therefore, since there are no validly established reason, then the debate is founded on what the parties accept as valid. Hence, it is proper to refute opponents in terms of what they accept. Even this is how it explains it. Okay.
야, 저런 된도 데 탄지진 타라니 치바데 용문부 쇼치 손도 다 찬조 셰트고 말에. 아니 같이 가시는데 버전아 소에 되지. 저당 아주 디기 전세대래. 아주 최제 티나와서네. 저당 그런 우만는 용세지 찬조 용거래. 최제 티나와서 돼 배는 안 잡아지게 파쇼될 따고에나 배는 알은 하거세 파쇼될 쇼거세. 네, 그 하거인가라니 팀모드 세메 주고 말해서 대신 주 계절.
So now here, Chechen Tuno in Tibetan, which means that it's the subject matter that has been accepted by both opponent and component. So when someone is asking a question, or someone is asking a question or arguing, having an argument based on certain subject matter, and then this if subject matter is accepted by the both parties, then there is no further argument is needed.
지당 가서 한국의 슈거세디 강사님이 제바집에 걸라 강사집이 파쇼들 좋아든 좋아 동에들이 파쇼 내정이들 슈거세 좋아 동에들 하고 말 좋아 동에들 슈거세 내정이들 하고 로지 차그래 같이 던지기 제바체네 아니 시샤체네 저바든 요거는 한국의 슈거세.
So in the Tibetan term, it's Ngago and Chigo, which is the questioner who is giving the question is called Ngago, and then the someone who is answering the question is called the Chigu, which is which in Tibet, which in English is translated as a proponent or the opponent.
다 던지기 지대 엄마 탄저 지대 엄마랑 집에 이미 온다 지켜니 다바 던지기 다의 거소나 아니 거슈거니가라 취제 좀 튀노도 처음에 저거를 세서나 아니 엄마랑 집에서 이게 다시 좀 시작되는 게 시행로디 취제 냥도기 처음에 줘야 그래요 말에.
So therefore, if you look
탄저가 이나 다시 좀 맞춰봐대 시작되는 아니 내적으로 다시 동으로.
If you look at the different opinions of these two schools of Madhyamaka, Prasangika, Svatantrika, there's no way that they could agree on the subject matter, because one is accepting inherent existence of everything's in event, whereas the other is rejecting inherent existence of things in event. So therefore, there's no way that the ideas can see eye to eye. There's no way that these ideas can be the same. This both proponent and opponents have different ideas of when it comes to how things really are.
단단히 노야들 시에보다 배는 한국도 어찌 슈거지 한국이 처음에 시바 간을 하고 그래. 근데 처음에 시바로 시바생이 때 공절이 있는 것은도 제바 관계 유 말했으네. 제도 되는 저거도 다른 데를 다른 거니 거기서 봐봐.
So here it talks about how can that one understands the proponent has the same viewpoint, or the proponent accepts the same subject matter, and how can one understand the opponent accepts the same subject matter.
야. 저기 단다가리 시 로는 게 받잖아. 오마르 탄저와 지금 오마르 집어서 좋아고 비가라. 좋아고에다 레정이 인가라. 취재天도 줘 봐요. 그 말이에요. 그러와.
So in brief, that which we must understand over here is now, when Madhyamaka Prasangika asks question to the Madhyamaka Svatantrika, they cannot reach any agreement. because their way of accepting how things really are is completely different. That's what that was. Yeah.
yang tenye le shen rangi ji tenzi ji sho la ge de tenzi dang zhu xia ta la chen me che ba zhu na de ce rangi zhu xie de jo wa yin la yuan jiang che ba ma zhu de ta che ba zhu ba xie bi chen ma ne mu su sang ji se ba ba yin no qian Tēlā rē shī ngō sōng jī chāpa mī rūpa tētā rē tsāng mā tōyā yīnsā rē tsāng mā tō ngō sōng tāng mī mī bā tētā kē mē tā tōwā tā lā ndē yu nā ndē yu bē ndē mē nā ndē mē tō shē mē mē nā mī chōng yu tō jī yu tāng jē tō nā yu bā lā nē mā yī nō jī sī pā bē chāng mā yī tē yu 대양 유행년 받지인 배소 대다 제스법이 당제 많이 대랑게 싫어 강의 주바샤와당 제위 다 유여바 대ኳ나 메다발로 소바 셰바 제원주와 인지 체바당 말이 유다 뒤 당제 되네 많이 노 되는지 댐비 캐남바 자주고네 처바 주바 인지 세면에 많이 배 당지지 땡치지 인지 슈 신진바 제다 미리 소 셰바오 xie towa yo pa la me yo pa tang, xie pa la me tabi chao pa, tse me zhu na rang ji te jang min zhu de, tse me zhu na ne yu du tang jie de towa xie pa me yo pa, me tabi chao pa zhu go pa la, chao pa zhu bi ngon song tang, je pa ki tsang mang tang, Pombi ten zang de zhu ba, pombi ten zang de zhu bian na, de nian ce wa yin bi shi ro, de na qiao ba ke lang ba zang ji zhu gu ba yin no xie se ten de ne, cui song ce me zhu bi da ji zhu na, xie na rang ji tang, cui song ke lang ji ta tu ba zang ji xie ba, tang ji dun de ba nang wo, ben ji dai song do, de lo xia lo qi.
And again, this same explanation of the Chandrakirti's commentary on the middle way continues. According to the partisans of the autonomous reasonings, what makes something an autonomous probative reason is that valid cognition establish the perturbation between the reason and the reason and probandum. If the perturbation is not established, a valid cognition that establish a perturbation is either a perception or the inference. Let us take them one at a time. A perception cannot establish the perturbation through what is perceived and what is not perceived. You can know that there is a necessary conditional relationship between fire and smoke in a kitchen, so that if one exists, the other will also, and if one does not exist, and neither will the other. However, you cannot deduce the existence of the fire from the existence of smoke in all places. Nor can you use inference to establish the perturbation, for that too is limited to certain domains. The domain of inference is not a universal, because knowledge that something is impermanent, for example, will arise only when there is a reason related to the probandum, and not in all places and times. Therefore, the perturbation is established only by way of what the world accepts, and not by means of the valid cognitions. Hence, how can it be wrong to use reductio syllogistic reasoning to refuse the oppositions. So if valid cognition did establish provision, such as the prevalence of the fire wherever there is smoke, or the impermanence of all impermanence of that is produced, then autonomous argument would be acceptable, but they do not. If valid cognition establish provision, then the provision concerning the existence of the fire wherever there is a smoke, and the impermanence where there is a protection, would have to be established in all places and times. However, since perception and the inference establish those provisions only in relation to specific domains, such as kitchen and the pots, and the scopes of those provision is limited. Therefore, mere acceptance and not valid cognition must establish even the provisions. This is what Jayananda says. Evidently, he believes that if a proof use a reason for which valid cognition has established the three criteria, then it is an autonomous argument. If a proof is met just on the basis of the parties accepting the fulfillment of the three criteria, then it is a reductio argument.
되게 저당 되게 계산돼 같이 인데 봐 가르치 와서 저당 랑지지 텐시당 탄진이게 아니 된다 되면 돼 비시오라게 하거든 수근이게 빠르라 아니 내시 때문에 거긴데 봐대 시와 내가 뒤 된다 도도를 못해 된대도 되는 처바 캔론 봐 상지 주고 봐 인노 시세대에서 내 추송 체매 주비 따지 세나 랑지 세그레스 추송 캔론 봐 캔론지 타투바 상지 세나 탄지 된대도 와세데 제가 바로 보기 주제 시비가라 가사지기 지지기 체맹에서 인데도 요구 말이에스 너바텔라 네 제가 라지지 텐지게는 지소 체매 총비 지소 체맹에 비 가사지를 따도 거로 아니 탄지 생에데 지소 체맹에 그뭐 처바 켈랑바 상지레스라 그래스 된다 된데 지레스.
So if you look at this last sentence of this paragraph, it's clearly mentioned that therefore mere acceptance and not valid cognition must establish even the provisions. This is what the Jayananda says, right? He says, evidently, he believes that if a proof use a reason for which valid cognition has established the three criteria, so it's very clear, and then it is an autonomous argument. If a proof is met just on the basis of the parties accepting the fulfillment of the three criteria, then it is a reductio argument.
야, 다들 그 배지 같이 들어오는 데가 배가 그걸 때서 로셔인다. 양 지발에서 된다. 변제다에 너무 로자와 다게 장 네게도서 엄마 발에 신준도 방고바자 마도비 장게 당자 매진 추진了소바 이 추진了소바 니가라 잡이 튜모 마주베 장지 메테도서 리베 넘버 시비 리베 양 신지 주단 되버 상시인라 델리젠비 란드 메베 란지지 텐시 넘버 탕제던 조바 메자오 데나 탕조와 코나인라 델랑 주베 탕조와네 란지지 타투바 수윤진비 타와 코나오 네 시jo 거던 데양 따다 쳐바니까 켈랑비 타투비는 탕조와 인베 양답이 수마 체마를 체마마이노 ndela tene jenje kia nombe choba chobane ji yugone shede delang ge ngawa jubi ten ngawa jubi tanjene par bo jewa denje tuje sun de jin da jen de bala da le jewa yoba jewa mare jewe jewa de me ba ta teme do jowa den jebe tuje ndoba miri las den doba den dona dale jewa ndoba miri so she geju maran gendu joba na parubu de shene 주탄 르버 상진 제부진 예노 젠다지 제바네 달레 제완데 비뉴고 달레 제와 메데 랑게 다니도 예베 셔로 시진다 젠라 잡이 추젠 당 달라 소바 jö나 jö네 파르봉고 바오 달레 제와 메데 시 마장 옌제 나 젠고바 장 옌제 랑게 제베 다다 가사 랑게 달레 제와 메베 메바 미주베 당자 메도 주자던 손바네 파르부 랑게 쇼주비 셰도 베 베타 베타 강그 민도 당시 하마단자와 마주반제와 진세 손병고뇨 네사 데켈렌시 진세 체바 메비 고네 고뇨 바오 와나 쳬라 파르부 켈렌 gonde yodame yona deni tanjawa yinbe de jubi ranji je ta yoba njoro de mena jenje kelan bangobi jipa jopa mete to shena de jena de ta la shebi cause ranji me ba jewa me ba shebi jujan de na ranji je tanja ta 당자다 뇌고바 레 데민데 바주메도 뇌바 여바 상제 당자여나 당제도 당자여바 여러 시체도 내내랑 쇼라 말에 랑라 쇼 주지 매장 연쇼고바 장당 뇌바 예장 당자 매바다 랑쇼 매바야 당된 담발라 쉐비코스 rangi meba soje tangja minjo pala sheje kene kange tangji meba ne mende to tangba la shepi kazi rangi mebi joja kela ne te ranglu se juba ne rangi bada teta ke melemba yenjen deba ngoba tsangshe ne tangjiwa nang mo tata oma tangji deba son deba lojara chikachi chabu shuyde Tata Tanjuin Kazan, Tata Tanjuin, the Baga, and the Batani, Asunda.
Yes, sir.
And then Shakalon.
Yeah, the second misinterpretation. Some translators, students of the scholar Jayananda, argues as follows. Madhyamaka have no thesis of their own. They only refute what others believe. Since elements of the syllogism has the object are not agreed upon, that is accepted by both parties, autonomous arguments are not tenable. The only result of reason analysis is that others give up their tenets. Apart from this, since Madhyamaka have no beliefs of their own, the autonomous syllogism should not be used under any circumstances. Therefore, only reductive arguments are permissible. Indeed, since these reductive arguments, which establish as a positive positions ultimately derive from autonomous syllogism. Only reductions that negates the position of the opponents are permissible. Since this latter type of reductive is a reductive in which both the reason and the propositions are merely accepted by both parties or derived from mere assertions of the parties. Correct valid cognition does not establish the reasons and the proposition. It is based on such reductio, and that it's eliminate the claims of elaborations of others, and they do this with four types of arguments of those. The reductive arguments expressing the contradiction works in the following ways. The opponent accepts the production, for example, is a purposeful and finite, and they also believe that the things are produced from themselves. But if a thing is if a thing is produced from itself, since that would mean there's something that already existed in being produced, and production would be the purposeless and endless, and it would be incorrect to hold that it is a purposeful and finite. If they accept that, then it would be incorrect for them to accept that things are produced from themselves. When the contradictions are established in this way, the only result is that proponents understand them and abandon its tenets. Inference based on what others accept refutes the opponent using subject, reason, and so forth that are accepted by the opponent. For example, the settling you have accepted the produce from itself is not the produce from itself, because it is its own very self. Even though the Madhyamakas state that it is not produced from itself, it is merely the refutation of others claim things arise from themselves. It does not establish for the Madhyamakas themselves the non-existence of the production from itself, and hence Madhyamakas have no this, or Madhyamaka have no thesis. Let's stop here with this today.
아니 다게 시외인 시내 방향 선제 통지 시외인 제내 방향 되는 주변 남아서 다지비 신경로도서 산에 엔도난 좀 투병 부이 전전 내마치다 그러 서보다 자치비 지선정이 아니 저기 와쇼 산에 센디나 네 방안지다 와저지.
Let's do our dedications by means of receiving this teaching or discussing on this profound topics. May I and all sentient beings, ignorance be dispelled and be able to cultivate this wisdom realizing emptiness. And may myself and all other sentient beings to gain the state of Vajradhara. And may I and all sentient beings to become a followers of the Buddha's teachings of the profound and vast and profound Buddha's vast and profound teachings. May all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the 10 direction please bless me to be able to do this.
도게 주님 사배 교환데 대난 조와 교나 감벤 저번 주전로 손조보 덴베니 모렌도 세제 조도전베 요즘에도 장레로니 제년데 제본 성제전도 메데베원 로견노도 진로 슈보 슈조와 근도 양도 나모 제면 주저 belong 쉐진 사단 남주연데 로도 도제 정계 고모녀도 쇼예당구르 면제는 야다야 면되는도 bel에 조니네 가다 양보 강시 사바 로미 마리 게동 조와나 나전저예 홍보도주 대마 순비 새로 근도양 전배 양제 세변 제송 대별은 박경상랑 제주 니네 주변 제노 예시 上给之前多别能觉呢，手着这个张元道给，若月也就明白这些呢，教育的毛一人这就，电报人间说给忙叫么，叫叫娘包就被说的，也就全部一绕就包也，平地的生活生活。世间教育民众真来了，来入上就能就人别。唐的那些一老百的人，教育这帮人都穷尽，朗诵主编天前主席经，给进世界门当明明，写到更多家园安保也，能当这我们就，刚才的把就了就是这，实现住了怎么的愿，多点能就到处主席。这些将是就跟潮就近，就是那面古菜老店，那个城内手机接不到，路上对面正面上送，这一面色大多年就近，看着上月过于健康，天堂的王梦里永远的，心里生活的在家中，小百姓的不多点就近，两百抱怨就大钱包。多松波电阳的现的得到根据就是道路，给我得到堂姐绕东我的送西边叫我东街，我跟老求都俺把的大金给人找我的根，松波是这绕东我。哎呀，对去天久。
Thank you so much, Rinpoche and Dean a lot.
Okay, you're welcome.